Hi, and welcome to Alchemy for the 21st Century, the Rebirth of Resistance. My name's Gary, and I just wanted to take a little time and talk with you about some topics I brought up on my last video. Beginning with, why is it that all mankind's efforts isn't producing the changes that he wants? And one of the reasons I gave for this is that it is his belief in the paradigm that keeps him playing the rigged game. What exactly does that mean? And that's one of the things I'd like to touch on a little bit. So I think we'll go back to the definition, and the definition for paradigm is that it is an organization of concepts which creates the beliefs that glues us into a culture. And we can see this movement somewhat in early history. What we find is people forming into groups in order to enhance their existence. And it is in this forming that we begin to see a concept of the divine, and it's this concept of the divine that gives people something to identify with and believe in that gels them into a culture. And it also differentiates them from the other cultures. And this was very important because most of early mankind time is centered around conflicts around this concept, or in other words, my God's better than yours. Now as we move up in time, it does become more complex. And what we see today is the statement that Western civilization is built upon Judeo-Christian values or beliefs. Again, what exactly does this mean? And the way I think we can begin to understand this is we take the words values and beliefs out and plug in the word concept. Now we can begin to define the statement. Now I've been studying ancient ideas for over 30 years, and I've come to the conclusion that there is 5 major concepts, or what I call pillars, from which all modern cultures evolve. And the first one is hierarchy. The second one is reward punishment. The third one is good evil. The fourth one is justice judgment. And the fifth one is rescue saving. And it is how these pillars are applied that even differentiate the cultures today and somewhat keep the ancient conflicts alive. So the next question here is, how do the pillars become a belief? And I think to begin to understand that, we must be aware that this happens over a very long stretch of time, and that every pillar, every paradigm has its beginnings and its endings. So in order to understand, we must go back to somewhat of the beginning. So what we see in the beginning is that the pillar becomes the belief. The first pillar becomes the belief that the hierarchy is a product of goodness and will work for us all. Number 2 is reward punishment, and reward punishment becomes the belief that if I follow the rules of the hierarchy, I will be rewarded. If not, I will be punished. Number 3 is what supports the hierarchy must be good, and what opposes it must be evil and should be shunned or destroyed. Number 4, that there is fairness in the hierarchy, and I will receive a just decision or judgment. And number 5 is the belief that it is from the hierarchy that we can it is from the hierarchy that provides the means for us all to prosper, and it cares about individual self-worth. Now this would be the process at its purest, and as mankind evolves up through time, corruption follows. And the degree of corruption, it is the degree of corruption that determines the magnitude of the culture's problems. So if we look at this from the 21st century, what we find and what we can say, okay, is that the hierarchy now works for the few at the expense of the many. Number 2, it is now possible for me to be punished for following the rules and rewarded for breaking them. Number 3, it is not necessarily true that what all supports the hierarchy is good and what opposes it is evil. As a matter of fact, it maybe could have even flipped. we now have laws that support the corruption. And does anybody still believe that it is the hierarchy that provides the means for us all to prosper, and it cares about individual self-worth? I think we can find our answers in that if we ask our friends in Europe and the Middle East. What we could say that it is apparent that the paradigm is becoming corrupt. And this corruption pushes mankind into what's called the Great Trap. And the Great Trap is, it is man's belief in the purity of the pillars that keeps him playing the rigged game, because he believes that we'll get better because there's nothing else to believe in, hence the need for a new paradigm. So let's go to the next stage. And the next stage of this, it is from the paradigm that we create the structures that organize our existence. And our definitions for structures is a system of institutions that provide the roles, knowledge, and justice needed to make the culture function. That again is in its purest state. Being that we are now aware that the paradigm is corrupt, what we have is a corrupt system that provides the means from which the culture can dysfunction. Okay, and we hear this said, and there's evidence of this being said when people say the system is broken. But that is not really a good definition. The system, when people say the system is broken, it gives the illusion that it can be fixed. But in reality, the system is dysfunctional and obsolete. So this brings us into the next stage, and that is what's happening today. And what I believe is happening today is something called structural change. And structural change is nothing more than structure changing itself for its future. So what we could say from this is that it is a group of institutions, a system of institutions that's redefining itself for the future. And that's relatively evident. I think people can see that. But what's not being seen is what's the purpose for the redefinition. And the purpose is for us to accept the corruption. But why is it important for us to accept the corruption? Let's go back to our formulas. It is our belief. It is our hope in the purity of the pillars that keep us playing the rigged game, because we believe it will get better because there's nothing else to believe in. And it is when hope that overcomes corruption that we start the new paradigm. So the relevance for us to believe in the corruption or to accept the corruption is that that makes hope a non-player. So instead of us getting a new paradigm in a new age from which mankind prospers differently and becomes better than what he is, we get stuck with an old paradigm repackaged. Okay, one that centers around loss of freedom, loss of prosperity, stagnation, the same old stuff, okay, where mankind becomes worse than what he presently is. But this does not necessarily have to happen. It is only if mankind gives up his leverage or fails to recognize his leverage can this occur. And it is not leverage that is found in structural change. Because remember too, structural change, the only thing the best mankind can do is to negotiate for a better deal. But since he is not aware of his leverage, what we get is angry movements that produce nothing. And the movement can be overcome with sticks and carrots. The leverage is found within the common man. It is the common man where the leverage lies. And that leverage is the beginning of a new paradigm. It is the common man that has the seeds of the new paradigm. And he begins to understand his leverage when he becomes aware again of his relevance. So I'd like to end this with the question: how does man overcome a corrupt game that he is made to believe he has to play when it is rigged that he can never win. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my video today and will continue following my alchemical works, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.